What is going on at Swan Bitcoin? Welcome back, everyone. We are going to dive into this story. So for the people who don't know, over the weekend, we started to see tweets like this. It seems that there was an email that was sent out by Swan Bitcoin having to do with essentially sending funds to Swan from Bitcoin mixers. Okay. And obviously, this got a lot of the privacy advocates, the anti-KYC AML advocates in an uproar, right? That's no question there, right? And anybody who's about individual privacy and personal responsibility knows that this is, unfortunately, this is a red flag. Anyways, let's dive into it. Here's the tweet from @WinTweets. Hung in there with all the Swan Bitcoin partner issues, but some lines can't be crossed. Further support of Swan financially only supports chain surveillance and policies in direct conflict with Bitcoin and Bitcoiners. And he tagged the CEO of Swan, Corey, and he tagged Samurai Wallet, which is a privacy-centric Bitcoin wallet. He also tagged at Seth for Privacy, another privacy advocate, and Odell. And, people who don't know Odell, he's the co-host of TFTC and the host of Citadel Dispatch and a whole bunch of other Bitcoin stuff. So obviously, this person wanted to get some attention. Let's take a look at this this snippet from the email. So our banking and custodial partners have made an update that could affect your account. In light of the recent proposed ruling from FinCEN regarding Bitcoin mixing, they will no longer service clients who directly interact with Bitcoin mixing services such as Wasabi, Samurai, and similar services. What this means for you, please be advised that depositing directly from or withdrawing directly to a mixer. So I apologize. In my initial statement, I said just sending funds to a mixer, but it appears it is directly to a mixer and directly from. Anyways, that may result in the termination of your account with our banking and custodial partners. And for the people who don't understand, essentially the way that it works is that Swan Bitcoin is a front end app. And they use a third-party service for their custodian. They used to use Prime Trust. We reported on that. We did a story on that. I'll put that in the at the end of the show. So for people who want to go back and take a look at some of the historical clips that I did about Swan. And then after that, what happened was that it was moved over. The funds were moved over to Fortress and. Hot wallet funds were moved over to Fortress. Anything that is considered cold offline would then go to BitGo. And then at one point, Ripple Labs made a bid to purchase Fortress investments, but that ended up falling through. So that was actually pretty bad. And shortly after, Swan had put out a release that they are going to be working on, seeing all of the issues that they've had. They're going to be working on building their own vertical stack. Okay, so now we're all caught up. To prevent any potential issues going forward, you can update your withdrawal address from Swan Dashboard. We at Swan fully support your right to privacy. We are actively lobbying against the government regulations that require regulated financial institutions to report mixing activity. And yes, indeed, I believe it was Jan, who is the CTO at Swan Bitcoin, and he put out a tweet essentially about this FinCEN regulation and how we should submit a letter. And he did provide a whole entire template of the letter, so you could literally just copy and paste it and submit it with all the relevant details. So, I mean, look, I do appreciate that. I did submit that letter, by the way, when I saw that tweet. I was like, yep, absolutely. Because you know what? That's something that I learned with a lot of these institutions. I'm talking about like FinCEN and the government. When they get an overwhelming amount of information swaying in one direction, they can't ignore it. I mean, they can try to ignore it, but they can't. Anyways, let's dive into the full story here because unfortunately, right, there's many cheerleaders for Swan. This is just not good, right? Like it just seems to be like one thing after another. Anyways, let's go. Swan Bitcoin might lose all banking access. And this is a article out of protos.com. and it was released November 15th. So Swan Bitcoin is warning users to not withdraw directly to Wasabi or Samurai wallets, two of the most popular Bitcoin mixing services, for at least the third time. Swan customers are having problems with banking access. Swan Bitcoin co-founder Jan Pritzker recently admitted that some of the banks and qualified custodians that Swan works with have been freezing or terminating accounts. An email from Swan claims that these suspensions affect customers who deposit or withdraw Bitcoin with a Bitcoin mixing service, and that is essentially the snippet that I just read you guys before. Pritzker's fellow co-founder and CEO Corey Clipston says Swan is negotiating with banks and considering legal actions. Meanwhile, he says the company could lose access to some fiat services if too many Swan Bitcoin customers use anonymizing services and violate those financial institutions' terms of service. Many claimed Swan was kowtowing to banks. A customer said Swan financially only supports chain surveillance and policies in direct conflict with Bitcoin. Samurai Wallet had particularly sharp words. It's still a proposal, you lame effing. You guys can read that. The firm posted on X, instead of mounting a defense, you preemptively comply? Absolute losers. Paul Stork, the people who don't know who Paul Stork is, he is he's kind of the biggest cheerleader and I guess you'd say creator of drive chains, which essentially is just a whole bunch of shitcoining on Bitcoin. I digress. We've covered that in previous clips as well, but let's see what Paul Stork had to say. He bemoaned Swan's announcement, saying Bitcoin's ability to enable permissionless transactions to any entity, including anonymizers, is Bitcoin's primary value proposition. Many chuckled, claiming that Swan was walking an inexorable path toward reinventing PayPal. He clarified that Swan doesn't have an explicit policy forbidding the use of mixing services. To the contrary, the company published a guide using them. A screenshot of Swan Bitcoin's update on anonymizing wallets says otherwise. In boldface, it reminds customers that they shouldn't deposit and withdraw directly with anonymizers, implying that adding a few hops might obfuscate their intentions to banking partners. And I just want to interject here at this point. That is considered to be a, I don't know if it's a best practice, but it is considered to be, in terms of privacy, a quote unquote good practice. Where essentially what happens is that, let's say you want to send your funds to an exchange or from an exchange back to your wallet, and you kind of want to make that path to your wallet a little bit more obscure, right? So what you would do is you would end up sending it possibly to maybe 1, 2, or 3 other addresses first that are not from that wallet, and then you would send it there. And that would essentially kind of help to throw somebody off the path of tracking you. But realistically, they just have to choose to track you a little bit more than one hop, and they'll figure it out. Anyways, even if banks and payment processors targeted customers with direct transactions with anonymizers in their latest round of suspensions, tracing activities, a few additional hops might be a trivial addition during their next round of suspension. So the article is essentially making the assertion that, yeah, you might be able to obfuscate your path right now, but that won't be for very long, because they can just simply add that to their script and decide, okay, well, we're going to check for more hops. Right? We're going to check for more addresses before we get to the final destination. Pritzker says banks and qualified custodians have been terminating services to various companies, not just Swan. That is true. That interact with crypto mixing services. He sympathizes with customers, admitting that these financial institutions are often the only way to have a viable on-ramp and off-ramp for Bitcoin activities. Many financial institutions have demonstrated reluctance to support customers to directly send funds to mixers, tumblers, CoinJoin pools, or any other type of identity obscuring service. Pritzker blamed the U.S. political climate and stringent regulations for financial businesses that don't implement strict know your customer anti-money laundering and counterfeiting the financing of terrorism procedures. He promised to fight for privacy rights in courts and express political dissent to entities like the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. He recommended an alternative to Wasabi and Samurai, Bisq. Pritzker blamed surveillance overreach of the Patriot Act and its predecessor, the Bank Secrecy Act, which require banks to collect and report on suspicious activities. He blames banks filing for frivolous suspicious activity reports, SARS, that make it easy for the government to surveil innocent people's financial lives. In the end, the news is simply another banking problem at Swan Bitcoin. For whatever reason, the company seems to have a fiat on-off ramp crisis every few months. The acquirer of Swan's second custodian of record, this is what I was talking about at the beginning, bailed on the acquisition, that's Ripple Labs, after it lost millions of dollars worth of assets and its CEO resigned. Swan has suspended withdrawals entirely for times in the past. It claims that custodying Bitcoin through third parties is so problematic that it is building its own custodial solution alongside BitGo. It will debut the self-branded service sometime in 2024. Banks and qualified custodians have suspended services to some customers of Swan Bitcoin. The freezes and account terminations have targeted Swan customers who interacted with coin mixing services like Samurai and Wasabi. Swan is now recommending that customers who want to use these services add hops to their transaction trail, but the effectiveness of this strategy seems temporary, which we said before. The news just doesn't seem to be getting better for Swan Bitcoin. They don't seem to be getting a break. That is obvious. They are definitely not getting a break. I mean, in all fairness, right? When I learned that Prime Trust was the custodian, I was pretty disappointed. And I'm not just blaming Swan. I mean, look, the reality is that this space, the type of rhetoric that we talk about, right? We talk about personal responsibility, we talk about personal freedom, we talk about monetary freedom, we talk about freedom of speech, like, you know, all of these, like, you know, core things that allow people to be individuals in society, to be uncensored, all of this stuff, you know. And then you find out that, you know, the people building in this space are essentially just creating extensions of the fiat system because, quote unquote, this is what works. This is what we have. This is how you make money. So I guess my one confusing point, right, is this. Why is it so hard? Why is it like we sit here and talk about low time preference and we talk about building things for the long run and we talk about how fiat robs us, you know, of our essentially of our future value. Why is it that we continue, not all of us, but why is it that some of us continue then to try to build products in that same spirit? Like, why shouldn't Bitcoin be an opportunity to say, you know what? The system has been having us build everything like this all the time, A, B, and C. I want to try something different. And the reason why I'm thinking of this, and people can correct me if I'm wrong. I've used, because I'm a Canadian, so I have used Bull Bitcoin in the past. I love the Bull Bitcoin product. I really appreciate the way that that they make their platform. To my knowledge, they don't have any type of problem or any type of concern like this with mixing services. Granted, somebody can use the argument, well, they're in Canada, but then I could also use the argument that there's most likely other stringent rules in Canada in place. So I guess my question is, how do we build something where we don't end up in a situation where the state can impose these types of rules? How? Bitcoin already answered that, right? Bitcoin already answered that. Decentralized. You make it so that there is no head to cut off. Unfortunately, though, metaphorically, unfortunately, though, we do live in a society and in a culture where all of our responsibility is essentially moved to a third party. We have no problem offsetting our responsibility to third parties. Okay, we've done this through almost everything. We've most of our services are all centralized. So the idea of us using a centralized service for Bitcoin, it doesn't, for a lot of people, it just doesn't faze them. They think, yeah, sure, and then I'll just follow the rules. But the thing is this, right? We already know that these rules aren't protecting us. Like, we already know that KYC AML doesn't work. We already know that all it does is provide checks and balances so that criminals know how to navigate the financial system and reduce their chances of getting caught. We also know that the legacy banking system is the biggest facilitator of money laundering around the world. So why do we all continue to LARP and pretend? Why aren't we really genuinely trying to build something different? I really hope for Swan that they do build that product. I hope that that product is what they claim it's going to be and not just be a wrapper for that type of a service. But anyways, we'll see. We'll see. We now have a tentative timeline, right? A tentative date is some point in 2024 when we should see this product from Swan come out, and I am interested to see that. Anyways, guys, what are your thoughts on this whole situation? I know that definitely on Twitter, you could see that the Swan Bitcoin product has disappointed quite a few privacy advocates and Bitcoiners and even some cheerleaders, as you saw in that initial tweet, right? People who were fully supporting Swan now have felt that they've stepped over a line, right? The line in the sand. Anyways, guys, let me know what you think. Put it in the comments. Like, subscribe, help us grow. Catch you guys all tomorrow.